OLS 001, the Soludo article, the only way it won't stop the Obi Aso Rock from coming. Introduction. The Obidient Movement needs a solid ideological leadership. No revolution ever succeeded without a strong and profound ideological background. Therefore, my role in this Obidient Movement is to help in providing a street-level ideological side to it. As a result, I am starting a lecture series dubbed OLS, Obidient Lecture Series. As this kicks off, I call on other intellectuals in the movement to do something too. Let's join hands to provide the needed ideological leadership in the Obidient Movement. How to follow the OLS lectures? The lectures will all be published online, so wherever you see this shared, either on YouTube or Twitter or elsewhere, sign up and ring the notification bell there, because I will be publishing subsequent lectures in the series on those platforms. A monumental war is going on in Nigeria. If you are fighting with someone, you should expect to win the fight, but you will be a fool if you think that your opponent can never defeat you. In fact, when you are fighting with someone, you should be ready for any kind of surprise attack. For example, your opponent could punch your nose or scoop your eye or even kill you. These are the thoughts that should get you prepped, up and doing all through the fight. Otherwise, your chances of losing the fight would be exceedingly high. As 2023 comes around, there is a big fight going on between the Nigerian masses, codenamed the Obedience, and the corrupt political establishment and their co-operators, herein codenamed the Disobedience. If you didn't know this before, you know it now. A word on codenaming. The codenames will have the associated parts of speech reflected in the use of language. For example, we may talk about obedience or a disobedient Nigerian. In my recent essay, Impossible to Rig, I used a hilarious rhyme to explain the philosophy of obedience from the values Mr. Peter Obi has espoused in his public service life. Clue: obedience is obedience to our conscience as Nigerians. Here is a screenshot of the title page of the document. Now, let's return to the thrust of this lecture session. Soludo's article is one of the strongest weapons being used by the disobedients to stop the success of the obedients and their principle. In case you didn't get it, the disobedients are the corrupt establishment and their thoughtless minions. I don't mean to be vulgar here, rather, I consider those minions objectively thoughtless because they don't understand that they are being used as Christmas goats by the cruel and corrupt establishment in Nigeria. This is to say that they are being fed now to be killed later. A full session of this lecture series will focus on explaining that point further. For now, the point I want to establish is that the Soludo article is one of the strongest points being used by the disobedients to stop the Obidati 2023 train. Once we understand that point, we will get to talk about how to stop the Soludo salvo from stopping the Obidient movement from being successful at last. Here are a few examples I just gathered from the Nigerian web space in less than 3 minutes. Look at it. It's a governor of Nasarawa State listening to Soludo, no one will buy P2B for 10 kobo. Imagine that. I hope this is not the P2B that we've been talking about for years. That somebody said cannot be bought for 10 kobo just because somebody says something about him. That is an event reported by Channels TV, a foremost TV station in Nigeria. Excerpts. Governor of Nasarawa State Abdullahi Sule on Wednesday dismissed polls for the 2023 elections that put the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, LP Peter Obi, ahead of others, including the All Progressives Congress APC, Bola Tinubu, and the People's Democratic Party's PDP Atiku Abubakar. Sule, who spoke during a live interview on Channels Television's Politics Today, argued that the criticisms of Obi, a former governor of Anambra State, by the incumbent Governor Charles Soludo, devalued his predecessor as a presidential candidate to less than 10 kobo. Believe it or leave it, that view of Governor Sule's is now being sold to and bought by millions upon millions of Nigerians, home and abroad. The establishment is using it maximally. A lot of money is going into pushing the Soludo narrative in the social and local media, both on and offline. In contrast to this, the Obedients seem to be complacent in pushing counter-narratives. For instance, I gave a scholarly response. I will share this document I'm reading at the description section of the YouTube entry for it. So when you get the actual document, you can click here and read my scholarly response. So for instance, I gave a scholarly response to the Soludo article that no newspaper agreed to publish. I sent it to them, but none of them published it. Surprisingly, and to reveal the contrasting complacency in the camps of the Obedients, my response got only a couple of reshares across social media in spite of every effort I have made for a whole week until this moment. In my response, I touched on every significant point Governor Soludo made in his article. For instance, I showed how clearly unfair was Soludo's insinuation that the Obedients are relatively the non-democratic elements in the country. Because only a few people got my response to Soludo, his very unfair assessment of the Obedients is still gaining traction in the local media network, both online and off. As anyone would expect, these unfair attacks are only getting weak Obedient resistances here and there. Most of those weak resistances are going to be quashed under the heavy media machinery of the establishment unless they get inspired by an equally strong or stronger counter view. Here are a few more instances of the Soludo narrative gaining traction on the Nigerian web space. I just remember this. Please, if you have any question on any gray area on this lecture, you can ask your question either on Twitter or on YouTube as a comment. Now, see what this person is saying. He was responding to someone, to an Obidient. He said, "You are a bigoted, unfortunate individual. That's why Soludo call you people a mob. Meanwhile, bullying, abuses and threats of violence cannot give you the presidency." I was talking about it before. The saying that the Obedients are relatively more undemocratic is very unfair. I gave examples to prove it in my response. An average obedient can effectively counter this disobedient attack if such an obedient studied my response to Governor Soludo. This is because I used several examples to show how the disobedients have been those how the disobedients have been those less tolerant of opposition views and existence. You see, the scriptures said that my people perish for lack of knowledge. One of the biggest problems with Nigeria is ignorance. That's why the establishment, especially up north, try to make the people uneducated in order to be easy to control. So, but with the number of educated people we have in Nigeria, knowledge can overcome brute force. See another one. He said, if you want to know how Al Makura performed, ask me because I have all the files. Okay, maybe this person worked with Al Makura, or is he an ex-governor or current governor? He said, if you want to know how Tinubu... Okay, this person is responding to Governor Sule's TV interview or TV program. He said, if you want to know how Al Makura performed, Al Makura is an ex-governor of Nasarawa State, and the person speaking is a current governor of Nasarawa State. So he's trying to compare himself, his situation with the situation of Peter Obi, or the situation of his predecessor, Al Makura, with what is happening between Peter Obi and the current governor of Anambra State. He said, if you want to know how Al Makura performed, ask me because I have all the files. If you want to know how Tinubu performed, ask Lagos State Governor. If you want to know how Peter Obi performed, ask Governor Soludo. Is that correct? No. I said this too isn't correct. Yet, it's now influencing many people's views about Mr. Peter Obi and the Obidient Movement. In my response to Governor Chukwuma Soludo, I showed using truths in both the Christian and Islamic scriptures to show how his attack on Obi is a further credit for Obi. Go there, you will see how I did that. See another person, he said, the same man that has nothing to show for the 8 years he governed Anambra according to Governor Soludo. You see how people can change narratives because they are desperate to continue to rob people. That's another unfair narrative of Soludo's that's now making the rounds and causing serious damages to the Obidient Movement while no one seems to notice it. Granted, there are still strong voices seeking to counter these disobedient voices. As I have discovered, really genuine ones can be found in virtually every geopolitical section and demographic of Nigeria. Here is a typical commendable example. This person was responding to Governor Sule's the report of Channels TV about what Governor Sule said. He said, Alhaji Sule, you can't compare other aspirants with Obi. Forget about what Soludo said. Some forces are using Soludo against Obi. The records are there for you to see for yourself. I will never vote for your APC presidential aspirants. Drugs affect all over his body. Now, you can see that this name is a northern name, the person giving this response. But unfortunately, these are not detailed enough and or widespread enough to be effective in countering the heavy media machinery of the disobedience pushed with millions of dollars stolen from the same Nigerians whose mindsets they are using the media to control. Conclusion. As earlier said, those screenshots I just shared above were sourced from the Nigerian web space in less than 3 minutes. I forgot to show them in a way as to reveal the Twitter timestamps. I mean the rest of them, except the one for Bello. In a way as to reveal the Twitter timestamps, which all indicate a period of less than a minute from posting to sourcing. It reveals what is going on as we talk, so it deserves every attention it can get before it spirals out of control. In my next outing, which would hopefully come in a couple of days, I am going to share more evidence of how the establishment is pushing the Soludo unfair narrative. In effect, they want to make Nigerians think, and I quote, if his own state governor and successor could say that about him, then Obi must be what Soludo said Obi is. This is why I make a clarion call on every obedient joining this lecture to make it a point of duty to consume and share my scholarly response to the Soludo article. I will link it here. I will link to that response here also. One important reason you should do this is that I am going to be referring to it a lot in this lecture series. I'm going to be referring to that a lot in the subsequent sessions of this lecture series. Thank you.